Hello, everyone. Welcome to another one of these Into Games discipline deep dives. The way that these events work is we sort of look at 8 core disciplines that we kind of recognize within the games industry or that we know exist within the games industry. So we look at animation, art, audio design. I have to look at a list: production, programming, marketing, and QA. And then for each one of these disciplines, you kind of identify like what does a junior or entry level job look like within that discipline. And then we look at what skills might be necessary to do that entry level job in that said discipline. There's lots of layers to this. I hope you can keep up. And then once we've identified the skills and the layers and the jobs and the disciplines, we then bring you these events. And these events are geared to basically look at specific skills that you need within the entry level job for the discipline within the thing, and then we sort of talk about that one specific skill. I hope that all makes sense. I hope I've brought you all up to speed. If this is your first time attending or seeing a video from Into Games is an organization that specifically works hard to improve accessibility for the games industry for individuals from lower resourced backgrounds. That is to say, we recognize that if you are from a low-income background or a working class background or similar, then the likelihood of you being sort of getting into the games industry is just harder to do so. You may not have had the resources, you may not have had the core education, and you may find that those opportunities just don't make themselves available to you. And so these events are available completely for free in an attempt to help change that and provide resources that others may not have had access to earlier in their lives. So hopefully that's enough background. A little bit about Into Games. Hello, hi, I'm Jonas. I'm the community and events lead. And today we're going to be talking about quality assurance. That is the discipline that we're sort of focusing on today. And specifically, we would like to talk a little bit about like what the tools and softwares and maybe some of the competencies are around working in quality assurance in games. Do you just boot up Windows 11 and then click the Word doc and just start typing "it's a bug"? Or are there layers to that? Are there bits of software that industry standard quality assurance testers are actually using in their environments? And I'm not going to talk about it because, as usual, what do I know? But I'll tell you who does know. It's my guest, Harun Ali. Hello, Harun. How's it going?
Hello, Jonas, and hello everyone into the intergame stratosphere. It's nice to see you all. Well, I can't see you, but like in my heart, I see you all.
Exactly. We can sense the digital views and clicks, as disconcerting as that may be. Harun, thank you for joining us today. So we're going to be talking, I sort of gave a little bit of intro there about like what the brief and sort of the overview of the talk is. But of course, yes, it's not my talk to deliver. So what I'm going to do, Harun, is I'm going to give you, oh so generously, I'm going to give you your slides. I'm going to put you up here. And Harun, when you're ready, basically, they're all yours. Take it away.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, I'm now on PowerPoint. I can't see any of you right now because all I see is my slides. So that hopefully helps my confidence in talking. But yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about QA, some of the tools, the trades, the different elements that go into the QA department. So hopefully, if this is your first time learning about QA, hopefully you'll pick up some cool and interesting stuff. So just a quick little background of myself. So I studied game development at a very young age. When I was about 18, I went on to university to study games art. Initially wanted to be a games artist, but my career kind of took a bit of a different turn, and I found myself in QA for most of my career in the games industry. Started off working at TT Games for a game called Lego Dimensions. Hopefully, some people have heard of that. It's a fun little toys to life game when that was a fad for a while. Was a teacher for a little bit, so I taught game development to young people, specifically at the FE level, general sort of like game design, art stuff, and then re-entered the games industry back in 2019, working as a QA tester, specifically an embedded tester for Cloud Imperium, and now I'm currently working at No Breaks Games, the company behind Human Fall Flat. So I want to kind of start by sort of debunking some of the assumptions that people have about QA. So let's just start off with talking like what QA is. So QA is the function of systematically reviewing, testing a product to ensure that it meets a certain level of quality. They are actively looking out for defects that players may come across, whether that be graphical, whether that be something to do with the actual game mechanic itself, like say, for example, a gun not reloading after its fifth reload. Basically, anything that is not intended by, say, the designers needs to be reported with all the essential information to help the developers reproduce the issue so they can fix them. QA is not reviewing a game and giving feedback to make it better. I have put asterisks there because QA can be used to do playtesting internally to help give those designers, artists, feedback on the game. But you're not a games journalist. You're not IGN. You're not GameSpot. QA aren't there to say if a game is good or bad. We don't provide them with that kind of feedback unless we're specifically doing playtesting. We're there to ensure that the vision that the team has is implemented correctly and is as bug-free as possible. So sometimes you do play a game that comes out and it does have defects. And if you're like me and you're progressively just doom scrolling forever on Twitter, I refuse to call it X, you will see a lot of people on social media who will accuse QA of not doing their job or not testing it thoroughly. So you'll see things like, was this game ever tested? Why is it so buggy? Why didn't QA fix these? Why don't the developers just test their own work? I was thinking about getting some actual real life tweets, but because I don't really respect these sort of comments, I decided just to make some fake ones up that I've seen, like people say, and I thought just to kind of show my lack of respect to these sort of comments that I see online, I've put them in the worst possible font, which is Comic Sans. So a lot of times when I see these sort of comments, I do have to do the Star Trek face palm there. But the short answer to this is yes. A lot of times when you play a game where you've seen an issue, QA has most likely have seen this issue and they've reported it and given those details to the team. QA will regularly provide production leadership with reports on findings and highlight areas of concern and give their recommendations. But ultimately, it comes down to the priority, resources, and general direction of leadership. Because don't forget, time is money. Especially with AAA games, you're sinking millions and millions into a game, and at some point that's going to run out, and so you have to make these sort of tough decisions to be like, okay, there are a few issues that we're aware of, but maybe we'll just do a waiver, put the game out there, and just fix it in a patch. It's a difficult decision to make, but it always depends on sort of like what the company has available to do. But QA do find a lot of these issues that players do sometimes see in the final product, and they usually get patched out not too long afterwards anyway. So developers, and especially with that last comment as well, like people always ask, like, why don't developers just test their own work to find these issues? So developers do an initial pass on their work, but their focus and time are primarily on the tasks to help drive the game production forward. The way to think of it is think of it like peer reviewing, because if you are working on a level or you're working on a piece of art, whatever it may be, you know what that piece of art is supposed to look like, you know what that particular like sort of gameplay loop is, so you will just automatically just do that gameplay loop. But when you have like a QA person come in, they're almost like peer reviewing it, so they might do something that you didn't expect a player to do. They'll find those sort of weird edge cases and do things that a designer or a coder didn't initially think of, and you'll be like, oh god damn it, I didn't think about this, I didn't think about a player doing this or that. So QA are always there to help and support the developers to do a pass, a deep dive into their work to make sure that it's bug free as possible. I think the last assumption that I want to discuss as well is a lot of times when people talk about QA, especially with like different talks, a lot of people will say that QA is a foot in the door into the gaming industry. A lot of people give this advice, to start off in QA and then go into the roles that you want to do. I myself have done that that advice myself, but it kind of disingenuous, because yes, it can be a foot into the door, but QA does have a lot of intricacies. It does have it does have a lot of different elements that you can specialize and make a career out of. In fact, it's kind of expected, like during your interviewing process, where like a leader or manager asks about your future aspirations, that you might mention that I want to become a designer or want to become an artist. If you do that at any other job, like your chances of getting that job will be in jeopardy. But in the QA department, if you talk about things, that's okay. It's encouraged that you can kind of branch out, which is fair. QA leadership understands that for many people, this is their starting point into the games industry. And my last workplace, they were very encouraging about getting their QA peers into other roles that they want to be in, because obviously if you keep great talent in your company, it thrives. And if you're a start off in QA and then move into design, having that QA background and knowledge makes you, I think, in my opinion, a better designer or a better programmer, because you know the QA processes, you know how to think like a tester, you know how to think about breaking things. That kind of makes it better, makes you a better tester as well. So I want to kind of start off by talking about the hierarchy in a QA department. So when you think about QA, a lot of people will think that the structure looks like this. You've got your QA, senior, lead, and a manager. So you're kind of going up naturally up the hierarchy. But actually, a QA department can be a little bit more varied and can kind of sometimes look like this. So if you think about the departments in the games industry, like say for example art, there are multiple different specialisms and routes that you can do within an art department. Art can encapsulate concept art, it can encapsulate hard surface modeling, character modeling, animation, and QA is similar. There are specialist roles that you can go into. Again, it kind of depends on the company, the complexity of their games, and what they want. So you can just be, again, just a sort of normal QA tester, but you can be a QA specialist who specializes in a specific sort of feature or role. You could become an embedded tester where you're actually working alongside developers. So I was an embedded environment art tester at Cloud Imperium. So I was on a constant day-to-day basis just talking to the artists, looking specifically for art issues, because I had an art background, so I knew how to kind of use some of the art tools to allow me to identify issues and relay that information to the artists. So yeah, so there's so many different sort of roles that you can go into: tech, resource, embedded, compliance. So don't just think it's just your bog standard QA side of it. There's obviously the hierarchical sort of leadership roles that you can get into, but specialist roles as well. So many people will think that when it comes to QA's involvement in the game production pipeline, that it usually is somewhere here in the middle, during sort of usually around the beta to possibly go like final stages of a game's release. And for most companies, this might be the case. With some companies that have, like, say, fixed term contracts, you're usually bringing in those QA testers closer to the final product, maybe it's like a year or two away from release, where the game's looking more like the final state. But sometimes QA can be involved in many elements of the production process. They could be involved in the pre-production stages. They can be involved in the post-production stages. If you're like embedded, you might get early access to new features or tools that aren't available yet for the wider QA team to look into. Maybe if you're a QA lead or a QA director, you might be involved in pitching meetings or planning meetings to see, okay, what are we doing for this next milestone? What we're doing for this next release? Like once you know that information, you can start planning ahead of time for your QA team to work on these new features that are coming. So QA can be involved in many different elements of the production pipeline. Post-launch, for instance, obviously, like a lot of games are online, or if you do like online multiplayer games or MOBAs, MMOs, server maintenance is a big one. So obviously, when new patches come in, QA got to be there to kind of test it, stress test it, to make sure that it's working for the general public. So I'm going to kind of go over some of the different roles and then kind of talk about some of the tools that are used in sort of day-to-day testing. So obviously you have your QA tester, which is your entry-level point when you're starting in the industry. So in your active day-to-day roles, you'll be essentially executing test cases and test plans that are laid out by your senior or lead testers. I'll explain test cases and test plans a little bit later as well. Most of the time with QA testers, you'll be doing something called black box testing. So this is when you're testing a piece of software that is familiar to how the end user experiences it, with the exception of maybe having access to debugging information that the normal everyday consumer won't have access to. So with black box testing, you don't really see the underlying game code that is there. So think of it as like, something's going into a box, that box is black, you can't see what's going inside it, you're just seeing what the outcome of it is. Like as mentioned earlier, like you're not really playing the game for fun. As a tester, you are directly responsible for finding, reproducing, and providing a detailed report with necessary evidence such as like videos, screenshots, player logs, whatever kind of logs that are needed on any issues that you find in the game. Some of the tasks that you'll find yourself participating in can be something called like ad hoc testing or free testing. This is when you're given sort of like free reign to try and destroy the game as best that you see fit. So you try to push the game to its breaking point to expose its faults and possible exploits. My piece of advice when it comes to free testing is like you want to start with like the obvious thing, just going through the golden path or the critical path of a level or a feature to make sure that that's where you can find there's no major blocking issues. But maybe then you might think, okay, like I need to start trying to find different ways of breaking things. And I always used to tell people, always ask yourself this question, which is, what happens if I do X? What happens if I do Y? So, for example, right now I'm in an office space right now. I could be like, if this was a video game, okay, I'd be like, okay, I'm doing an office simulator game. What happens if I take this water bottle and just chuck it at the screen? What happens if I crawl under the desk? What happens if I try jumping as I'm crawling under the desk? Silly things like that. Just trying to do some out of the box sort of thinking, trying to be creative with your thinking process. You can also implement something called the scientific method as well. So have coming up with a hypothesis, testing it out and then coming up with the solutions and results as well to kind of help kind of break the game or try to find ways of exploiting it or find issues that someone might have forgot about. Regression. So this is when new content or features or large changes to a game mechanic or code are implemented into a game, you might be required to go back to an existing level to make sure it hasn't degraded in quality. So maybe, again, if it's like, say, like a first-person shooter game, there's like a new parkour system that's been introduced, or an update to the parkour system. And in the previous levels, it was working fine, but now we've got this new code in. How does that work with the older levels? Does it kind of provide any new exploits? Are there possible crashes or issues that will happen because of this new feature being added in? So yeah, I can probably get to like regression. A lot of times in QA, it can be a bit of a repetitive process because you are kind of constantly testing and replaying areas of a game or a feature over and over again over an extended amount of time. Because again, the development process, things change, things evolve, and you need to keep testing it to make sure that it's working fine. Retesting is where you go over resolved issues and confirm that the issues are indeed fixed. So for example, maybe if a door is missing some collision detection, the player can just walk through it, and the artist can be like, yep, I fixed it. You have to be like, did you though? So you have to go and retest that bug that you've created or someone else has created and confirm like, yeah, this is indeed fixed. Because sometimes when a person fixes a bug, sometimes, yeah, great, it's fixed, but other times it could cause new problems to occur, or maybe it's actually not fixed. Maybe there's another reason why it's not working. So then you have to kind of the developers will have to kind of go and do more of a deep dive into what the issue is, maybe having that QA support to kind of help figure out like other sort of edge cases as to why it might not be working. And obviously you'll be completing test cases and test suites, going over specific scenarios to make sure that they're working. So giving like a pass, fail, or pass with issues sort of status. QA leadership roles. So obviously if you wanted to go through the hierarchy of a QA department, you'll find that as you're going up the food chain, you'll spend less time testing the game and more time managing people. So at each level of seniority, you need to make sure that the standards within the QA department are consistent throughout the entire team. So really, you're kind of doing quality assurance on quality assurance. So it's kind of like quality exception Inception. Inception. That's a terrible joke. I'm sorry. But yeah, so you need to make sure that the bug reports are consistent with the internal standards, as well as keeping up to date with any sort of changes to the game, making any necessary updates to test cases or internal documentation. For example, like say bugging guidelines, or maybe like say flow charts for like a game level to make sure that everyone knows what the current standard is for the game. So a lot of responsibilities that I'm going to be talking about right now can be shared between sort of the different sort of leadership roles. So, for example, with a senior, they're like an expert tester who have excellent knowledge of the QA process. You'll still be involved with the actual testing process, so you'll be working more closely with the testers each day. You'll essentially be the eyes and ears of the QA lead and be in consistent communication with them to help filter any major issues or concerns through the chain of command. With a lead, their role is usually for someone who's more seasoned. They're given multiple responsibilities on a project. They can lead. As a lead, you can schedule and maintain the day-to-day testing to make sure that everything is being worked on and completed effectively. And with leadership roles, efficiency is key. So you want to make sure that you're prioritizing tasks according to the production schedule. So if level 20 is currently in production and people are working on it, it makes more sense to focus on that level for your testing rather than say like the tutorial level, which was done like 2-3 months ago. Yeah, maybe you want to kind of go back and look at it a little bit, but you know, as a lead, it's like, right, our focus should be on this because it's what we're actively working on, this active changes and development going on there. We need to make sure that we're providing the correct amount of resources to that particular area of the game. Managers will have a higher level organizational tasks to do, so they have sort of more long-term planning for development, such as scheduling, such as schedules, budgets, which can be used for recruitment, new resources, or even be used, or as a manager, maybe you're just doing some like social events to help boost team morale. And with a lot of these leadership roles as well, especially when you're going like lead upwards, they do take part in production meetings with like executives, these kind of things, to present information and data from the QA team to kind of give like a realistic expectation of standards of a feature or level that is going on. So they're in those meetings representing the whole QA team and providing their knowledge and insights into the state of the project. Technical QA roles. So with these roles, it's more focusing on the software or elements of software that I use during the game making process. Many companies might have their own in-game engine. So for example, Ubisoft have like say Snowdrop, it have IdTech. Even companies that have like say they use third-party engines like Unity or Unreal. You might even customize them and create your own in-house tools to help improve the workflow for other teams. So this is where tech or even like say QA tool testers can come in, because they work less in the client, which is the actual game itself, and they focus more on the game engine, such as like say new features or updates to the game engine tools, doing a sanity pass, or just checking like the core features of the game engine are working itself. So with these roles, it does require a bit more technical knowledge, as we'd have some understanding of game engines or even script knowledge as well. So for example, QA engineers, they will also utilize other technical aspects, such as understanding scripting and coding languages, just like say Python, Java, C++, C#. With engineers, you are actually expected to create, execute, and manage automated testing processes. Debugging is another aspect of the engineering role. You'll find yourself using software such as like say Visual Studio to read call stacks and scripts on other lines of codes to help identify issues and help maintain the quality and standards and help kind of move the game towards sort of better optimization. And with these technical roles, you're primarily doing something called white box testing. This is when a tester has access to the inner workings of the game code. So the metaphor here would be if something goes into a box, this box is essentially sort of like transparent. You can actually see what is going on as a product comes out the other side of it. Embedded roles. This was actually something that I didn't know about until I started working at my previous job. I was under the assumption that QA are just kind of like away from the actual departments of other teams, but no, like many companies have embedded testers who are assigned to a particular department as their go-to person for their testing needs. So you act as a go-between to your assigned department and the rest of QA. You will specialize, learn the intricacies of your assigned department's pipeline, such as say art, design, AI, even characters could have embedded testers assigned to them as well. So there's different embedded QA roles that can exist within a department. And again, it depends on the company. Some might have embedded, some might not. It just depends on the sort of, I guess, the complexity of their project and the needs of the teams. So embedded can be a mix of both general testing, where you're just playing the game and finding issues relating to your assigned department's work, but also there's more technical testing, as you'll find yourself using the game engine more frequently for sanity passes, regressing issues, testing existing or upcoming in-house tools that will help the development process for the team that you're assigned to. The benefit of being embedded is that you are working directly with those developers, as mentioned. You provide them with updates and you talk to them about the issues that you're seeing and what you're testing. This puts you in a really ideal position to naturally transition into a role within that department, as you're already in a prime position to do so because you understand their workflows, their processes, the tools that I use. So you could actually start taking on extra responsibilities, such as like bug fixing or assisting with tasks. At my last workplace, I think I made like a model actually for Star Citizen that's still in the game. I even did like little like things just to kind of help with optimization in the game, just like little things here and there, not sort of major things. But being able to, because they could trust me, they knew that I knew how to use the game engine. They walked through the process. I knew the workflows, so I could do these sort of small extra tasks that were really beneficial and supportive for the overall team. So most of the time with embedded roles, they might not be externally advertised. Some will be, some won't. From my experience, they used to initially be internally advertised, but I think more and more now they kind of get more externally advertised on websites like say LinkedIn, for example. So if you're already working as a QA tester, maybe like your QA managers might email to the whole department saying, hey, we have internal openings for these embedded positions. So if you're already a QA tester, there may be openings for these specific roles as you get more experience or the longer that you stay there. So I'm going to talk about some of these the day-to-day tools that you might be using as a QA tester. So when you're starting off as QA, all the bugs and tasks that come through for not just the QA department, but for again the wider teams, they need to be tracked in some way to kind of hold people sort of accountable and have visibility on the progress of the project. So most of the industry use like online project management tools that help track the progress of the game's development. So some of the examples that I've got on screen here is like, say for example, Jira, which is an Atlassian product. It's designed to report and track issues, but over time it's been evolved to be more like a useful management tool because you can use it to create like say Kanban boards to create like sort of visual tracking the progress of like a task. You can create like say dashboards that act as a hub for your team or department to see like, okay, how many bugs we've got for this feature, how many bugs we've got for this level, what's the current like rate of like resolved bugs to unresolved bugs, all these sort of different things, all this sort of data that you can use to kind of track the progress of say the QA department or just a different department in general. If you're a producer actually as well, like having access to that kind of dashboard information can really help to kind of again just track where things are going. So with Jira, a lot of times you use that for tracking issues, obviously doing searches because all of the bugs that you put in Jira, they're all in a database, so you have to do searches for those as well. So one of the features they have is like advanced searches, which is like JQL, which is kind of like the Jira sort of scripting language. So you can kind of tailor your search functions to help narrow down any existing bugs that are in that database, so that way you don't accidentally create duplicate reports. You can also use it to set up like say automations as well. So maybe if a bug is assigned to the art team, maybe it automatically goes to the art producer rather than having to do it manually. Or maybe if a bug is reopened, it gets reassigned to the person that created that bug. So if I created a bug and it was fixed, but another tester checked it, is actually still there. They could reopen it. It could be reassigned to me to check it again, or it could be reassigned to the developer to actually be like, actually, you need to go back and fix this issue. The good thing with Jira as well is like, if you want to try it out, it is free for up to 10 users. You might not have like all the advanced features, but if you're like a small indie team or like a small student team, it's worth kind of like trying out and using it. There's Bugzilla, which is, again, it's primarily focused on bug reporting. It is an open source web-based system. So its primary function is just for creating and tracking issues. There'll be some similarities between Jira and Bugzilla. A lot of the software that I'm talking about, there's a lot of like features that cross over. I think the main thing with Bugzilla is that it is free. I haven't used it myself. I've mainly used Jira. But again, if you're a small team using Jira, using Bugzilla would be a great starting point because it's free. You can kind of start off and just learn how it's used. It goes to like Trello as well, which is more of like Kanban boards. Just to kind of have like a visual tool to kind of see the progress of a project. So I actually have an example of a bug report here. This is actually a bug report for my own game. I made a game recently. Please buy it. No, so I actually used Jira to kind of track some issues. So I thought I'd kind of go over and show some of the features of Jira. So when you're creating a bug report, it's really important that you have a detailed enough summary so that people can actually find your issues. Because don't forget, in say like a Jira database or like a bug database, all the issues are created by another human being. So you want to make sure that your summary has the keywords or phrases that people are most likely going to search for when they're searching in Jira. So for example, if there's like a hole in a wall, you could say, oh, there's missing geometry in this wall, or you could write it as there's a hole in this wall. Now, both of them, you could argue, are valid summaries. They're a little bit short for this example, but they're valid summaries. But what's the word that people are going to most likely use when they're searching it? They're not going to use a term like geometry. They might just say hole, because that's an easier word to use. So you've got to think about, okay, what's the person most likely going to use when searching it up? And a lot of times when you're doing summaries, you want to have say the level name followed by the feature. So is this an issue related to code? Is there an issue related to design? So you want to add that into your summary and then write the short description of it. After that, you have the description section. A lot of times descriptions are just basically a repeat of the summary, but sometimes there might be extra information that you need to that you want to provide context for the developers. So a good example could be maybe if you're testing a gun that isn't reloading, maybe you can write in the description that you tested these other guns and they were fine, or maybe it's only affecting this specific variation of that gun. That extra information will be very useful for a developer because it kind of shows that you've done your due diligence. You've checked these other extra things, and it kind of helps narrow down what the issue could be. And then it's usually followed by reproduction steps. So these these step by step. I'm messing that sentence up. These are the steps that you take to reproduce that issue. You want to kind of be careful with your reproduction steps. You don't make them too long where it's going to bore someone. You don't want to make it too short where it's not giving enough information. You've got to find that sort of nice sweet spot. Because don't assume that the developer has as much intimate knowledge of the game as you do. Because don't forget, that coder, that designer, that artist, they're fully focused on what they are doing. They don't play the game on a day-to-day basis like you do. So you have more knowledge about what is going on with that game. So don't assume that they know what's going on. So you have to make sure that your reproduction steps clearly outline how to make this bug happen. And near the end, you put the expected results. You say, okay, when you follow all these steps, what should happen? So in this one, for example, with regards to the back button on the load game options page, if you press the back button, you should go back to the main menu. But what actually happens in the actual results is you press it, nothing happens. It's always good to have attachments to your videos as well, attachments to your Jira as well, just because again it makes it easier. Because someone can either read the reproduction steps or just watch the video to see what the issue actually looks like. And then in the far right outside in the details section, you can see like the priority. So this might usually be done by either say the QA lead or production. So the priority is like, okay, should we have a look at this issue now, or can it be done later? Like where does it stand? So a critical issue would be something that is hampering gameplay. It's a bad enough issue that it's ruining the gameplay experience. I think in hindsight, there should technically be a blocker actually, rather than a critical. You have like a blocker issue, which basically prevents you from progressing or continuing on with a game. So in hindsight, I should have put it as a blocker actually. Severity is basically saying how bad this issue is. So like S1 being like, yeah, this is like a blocker issue. This is a critical issue. It needs to be. It needs sorting. Priorities and severities can kind of like fluctuate a little bit. A lot of times they kind of are the same, but sometimes, yes, a severity issue might be pretty bad, but in terms of priority, it might not be for the team to work on. So an example that I can give is when I worked on Lego Dimensions, I found a really obscure crash. You had to do some really weird stuff to do it. I can't remember what I thought. It was like you had to kill this person like 4 or 5 times, and then it creates a duplicate, and then you kill that duplicate, it would cause it to crash. And like I don't think a player would ever really do that the way that I did it. So yeah, like in terms of severity, it's bad because it crashes the game. But in terms of priority, it's kind of low because it's such a weird and obscure edge case that it might be worth like fixing it at a later point, not like it has to be immediately resolved like at this current moment. Other information you can add to it as well is like you add components to your JIRAs. Again, this helps like sort of like search functionalities and filtering. So you can say like, okay, this issue encapsulates like code, UI, HUD elements. You have extra information, and also maybe like locations, which team that it might need to go on to as well. So there's always a lot of information that can be provided. Yeah, so I always say with the bug reports, always just make sure that you thoroughly read through these to make sure that they make sense as well. So you want to make sure that your bug report makes sense and is concise. You don't have to worry as a QA tester about assigning it to the right person, because that's not your job really. That's a job for either like a lead or a producer to do. Like they'll assign it to the appropriate person to fix it, because they would know, the producer would know like who is working on the area and who needs to fix it. Oh, and at the bottom as well, sorry, I forgot to mention, like that's an example of JQL as well. So of Jira's scripting language for when you're searching for filters as well. So we'll have a look at some test case tools as well. So I mentioned test cases earlier. Test cases and test suites allow QA to methodically check and be able to showcase the status of a mechanic with no stone left unturned. With free testing, yeah, it's great because you have freedom to do whatever, but it can be easy to forget or gloss over aspects when you're experimenting with like 10 different ways of trying to break something. So it's important to have a good balance of systematic control testing and free testing to try to cover all the bases. So with test cases, just to kind of give a definition of that, a test case is an individual test that is carried out to verify an element of a game is working as intended, and a test suite is a collection of those tests. I'll show an example relatively soon. So there are various different online tools that users can use to manage test plans to provide, and these software like say TestRail, Case, Tusk, they're really great because they provide like sort of visual updates and reports on the progression of tasks that you can give to like say a producer or give to leadership to be like, here's a breakdown of our test case at the moment to kind of see the status of a feature. Yeah, like I said, like many of these test cases have sort of similar tools. Most of them are web-based, and it allows for a lot of accountability and visibility on the test cases because you can assign them to a particular person or assign them to yourself. They can track the time and so you kind of get a good estimate of like how long something is taking. And a lot of these software, like say for example, TestRail, they can be linked to other project management software as well. So for example, TestRail, you can link Jira's like Jira bug reports to it on TestRail, but it can also be linked to the Jira. So I'll go back for a second. So for example, like maybe at the bottom, there might be a link to a test rail because it's like, oh, this was linked to this like test rail like 2258 or something. And the last one, I put Excel. I didn't really write much for Excel. It is a classic sort of software spreadsheet that many of us probably use. I haven't touched since like school or something. But I would say it's probably worth brushing up on how to use Excel because Excel can be used quite frequently by QA and other departments, like say, for example, production, as it's a convenient tool to create, like say, budget plans, create or maintain schedules. But QA can also use it to create, very simple sort of like test suites or issue tracking documents. And these documents can be available online, like say on SharePoint. So multiple QA testers can work on the same document, allow users to update the results in real time. So it is worth kind of like learning how to use, like say, the data formatting or researching some formulas to help create like a decent Excel test sheet. So like formulas to create like, bug IDs, drop down lists, calculating time. I guess the benefit of using like say Tusk, Case, or TestRail is that you don't have to worry about creating those because they're kind of already there. But if you don't have the resources to use those other ones, Excel is still a good alternative to use. So this is just an example of a TestRail that I just grabbed from the internet because I couldn't get one from a real life game, unfortunately. But you can see straight away like just like the visual element of TestRail. So you can see with the pie chart, you can see like, okay, how many tests have passed, how many are blocked due to like an existing issue that stops you from testing these things, what needs retesting because it was broken, but now it's fixed, so we need to retest these sort of things. There you might have noticed there might be some similarities between bug reports because on the right side, you can see that you have a summary, a title for the test case. You might have some preconditions, like maybe I have to do something beforehand, but then there's steps as well. So like you have to follow these steps and you put the expected result. So if you follow these steps, the expected result should happen. And on the left side, you can see like with the folders, you can organize them into different sections. To kind of help to sort of like manage all these test cases. So an example that I can think of top of my head is when I used to work at Cloud again, we used to test the different guns, and there'd be like maybe like 15 or 20 test cases for a gun, and you're thinking, wait, hang on, like how can you have that many test cases for a gun? Well, if you think about it, there's like a lot of things you got to make sure that it's working with it. So number one, has it got the correct art on it? Does it have the correct materials? Has it got collisions? And then you've got to test the functionality. Can you switch different firing ranges, like short burst or single shot, whatever it's called, or the ones that I'm trying to think of right now? Can you aim down the sight? Can you reload? Can you put the gun away? So there's like multiple different test cases that you want to create. You want to methodically break it down in order to effectively test to make sure that that function or tool is working correctly. And this is just another example of some test case tools. This is I think this is Case. Yeah. So this is another one, again, similar to TestRail. It looks, you have your preconditions, steps, descriptions. So these are great tools to use when it comes to creating your test plans or test cases. So we talked about some of the roles, we talked about some of the tools that I use, but I also want to kind of put an emphasis on the soft skills that I needed to be an effective QA tester. So obviously, like interpersonal skills, communication, teamwork, leadership, these are all extremely vital skills. Good verbal and written communication are important within the working environment. It becomes more invaluable as you move the hierarchy, as there's more visibility on you from management, producers, and even executives. So if you're being a point of contact for new starters or testers, you want to make sure that you're able to articulate your point as effectively as possible. Writing skills is key, as you've probably seen earlier with the bug reports. So you want to make sure that you're not just giving sort of bare bones information, because that's not going to help anyone. You want to make sure that you're writing comprehensive reproduction steps that clearly show how to recreate the issue and provide as much supplementary details as possible. Problem solving as well is a vital skill. As you'll find yourself testing new mechanics or locations that you come across, like exploits or game crashes that are no longer working, you've got to You got to think outside the box. You got to think about, you got to retrace your steps, think about what you've done, and think about different ways that could be done to reproduce an issue. Because sometimes you might see an issue that can be difficult to reproduce. So you have to think about the different variables that could result in this issue happening, track down the sources and causes, just basically be a bit like an investigator to figure out what is happening right now. So again, going back to what I said earlier about asking yourself, what happens if I do X, essentially. Some pluses when it comes to working in QA as well is understanding some agile methodology, which is like a project management technique, which is used quite frequently in games because it allows for quick innovations to happen a lot. And something that you could also look into as well is looking for like an ISTQB, which is the International Software Testing Qualification. Yeah, I think that's right. I think I got the acronym right. It's not needed for QA testing. A lot of QA roles for games specifically don't really require it. Some might see it as a benefit because it's more of a software testing qualification. But in those courses, they talk about agile methodologies. They talk about automated testing. So having that will help you kind of branch off into software testing if you want to kind of go out of the games industry sometimes. I think I've seen a lot of times when I've looked at like sort of jobs abroad, they always put like ISTQB qualification as like I wouldn't say necessity, but I know it's like recommended, or they do mention it sometimes. So ways of sort of building your experiences. So maybe you want to try your hand at creating trying to find issues. Some ways you can do that is you could take part in usability testing as well. So companies will host like play testing sessions to provide critical feedback on games, usually on games that are unreleased. So this can be really helpful because you can give developers information about how a game feels. Is it intuitive? Is it easy to understand? All this information is really valuable to developers. So if you are going to partake in sort of play testing, just try to provide like comprehensive, well thought out feedback to help developers out. And you can also add that to your CV or cover letter, say like, hey, I've tested multiple different games. I've given all this sort of great feedback out there. Community bug reporting as well. So there's many games out there, especially like online games, that have forums or have dedicated sites for you to report bugs. So the example I got on the screen right now is, I think it's Rainbow Six Siege, if I remember correctly. Yeah. You can kind of see already, like just by looking at it, it kind of looks like a Jira report, kind of looks like a bug report. So if you are going to create these community bug reports, make sure they're really comprehensive, make sure they're really thought out bug reports with the necessary evidence, because you're kind of already doing the job of a QA tester actually, and you could again mention that in like your cover letters. You can mention that in your interviews to be like, hey, I've done a bunch of QA testing, right? Like here's some examples that I've made. And I think one of the things as well is if you are making your own game, or if you're even playing your own game, you can just basically write test cases and bug reports for them. Use the software that we've talked about today, Jira, Confluence, Excel, create test cases, create bug reports, and just refine those particular skills. As mentioned, some of these softwares aren't free, but there's some might have like trials or will have like a limited version for like a small amount of people. So I always highly encourage people to use these software to kind of get a head start on how to use them. It'll look great on, again, your CV or an interview, showing that you've actually gone above and beyond. You're not just interested in being a QA, like you're actively researching it and you're learning the processes as well. I think I've come to the end of my presentation now. So I want to thank everyone for listening. I think we've got about 15 minutes left, so I can open up to like a Q&A. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but like during these slides, I did put some intentional issues in them. So if you saw any of those, like congratulations, 1,000 points to you, but they don't matter. It's like Whose Lines Anywhere reference for some reason. I've also written a book on video game testing. It's called The Pocket Mentor's Guide for Games Testing, which is available on many online book outlets like Amazon, Routledge, which is the publisher as well. And it's got a lot of great sort of insights and feedbacks about the different roles, the interviewing process, and just sort of day-to-day stuff as well.
Beautiful stuff, Harun. Thank you so much for going through all of that comprehensive, start to finish, lots of massive takeaways, pie charts to dazzle the mind, especially the budding producers inside. Many of us, I'm sure, were pleased to see all of the lovely Kanban boards and bits and bobs. So yeah, thank you very much. And thank you to the audience who've been listening and chatting away. Some very familiar names there in the audience, who we can talk to now. Yeah, because it's not quite 2 o'clock, so there's definitely time for a couple of little questions there. I can see there's a question from Dan Tonkin, but I'm going to start with a different question first because I think it will lead into that one, which is so you mentioned like a really good sort of way to build up experience is to just actually try a little bit of playtesting. We just swap our faces so we're bigger. There we go. To get some experience, just to do a little bit of playtesting, right? And like actually get out there and try and find games that might not be out yet, but the publishers or the developers will actually be looking for people to come in and actually get their hands on that game early. What would you say that there are any good like ways of knowing when that comes up? Like, should I be following a newsletter? Is there maybe one single website that just lists all the opportunities? Is it that simple, or is there is there a bit of a nuance to it?
I think there's a bit of a nuance to it because I've tried to give like people advice and help on how to find these playtesting sessions. It can be a bit difficult actually to find some of them. A lot of the sort of the big AAA or big like sort of indie companies, they do host them. So I know for a fact like Team 17, Activision, there's a few others, EA, they do playtesting sessions as well. And there are specific organizations that provide playtesting support to developers. So a game company will approach them to be like, hey, we want external playtesting, and they will have like their pool of playtesters that they find. I think if you just like to Google search, like there's such a cheap cop out question to answer, but like I've had it myself where it's like I Google like playtesting companies. I think it was actually an article I found yesterday on LinkedIn that had like a little list of like 10 or so playtesting companies, because a lot of these companies you never heard of. Like they just provide a service because they're providing services to developers. So you can have a look at like big AAA companies because they will have sort of playtesting opportunities. But I would say like you have to do like a lot of research to see like these smaller organizations that provide those services to companies, because they will be actively looking for playtesters. I was in a Discord server that had a playtesting section in there, but I was trying to find it yesterday. For life of me, I can't find it. It was in some like indie game dev Discord. I forgot which one. I'm sorry. I was genuinely trying to find it yesterday, but I couldn't find it.
That's all right. No. I thought it'd be good to talk about because I mean, actually, Tommy in the chat, TommyAck102 mentions like Deadlock being in early access. But what I particularly want to draw from is like you can go to Steam and find games that are just in early access, right? Like it's an entire category of game. And I'm sure that there's something to be said for like, okay, you can't go play an early access game and then send like unsolicited bug reports to the developers, I'm sure. But normally if a game's in early access, they will have some facility of saying, can you please let us know about bugs that you find? And even if that in and of itself is not the career, like you're not getting paid to do that. By doing that a lot, you will probably learn like what information they're actually looking for. Like, you'll understand on the form, it's like, oh, they wanted a screenshot and they wanted like a timestamp and they wanted me to describe like the build of my character or something, so trying to understand that like some developers know exactly what's likely to crash that game or like feed into that conversation. And then
I've had that myself when I've done my own game recently, like my point and click game. I've not had many people like on the forums tell me some stuff, but there are people who pointed out bugs to me, and they were really great because I saw those and I was like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that they were there and I could fix them. Sometimes they would like explain exactly what it is, but sometimes I had to ask them like, hey, can you give me a bit more information of like how this happened? And they were always nice enough to tell me, and they'll say, oh, cool, they've given me that information. I can go and reproduce it and fix those issues. Because I kind of do so much myself and like my own little team when testing our games. So having it out in the public really helped.
And like again, this may not lead to a career for anyone, but often if you're playing on PC or PlayStation or something, you can get it to record like the last 5 minutes of gameplay and like save it in a hard drive, which can often just be a really. I used to just do that because I found it funny to tweet funny bugs, like putting on Twitter that like Wonder Woman multiverses, like her attack glitches out if you do it at this space in midair. Again, doesn't get you a career, but having that conversation to talk about bugs and like actually say like, look at this, like I can repeat this, is probably a very good sort of starting point that leads into something more meaningful. That took up more time than I anticipated, but what I wanted to do was then actually focus on the question from Dan Tonkin, who goes, so, talking about where you can find playtesting, Dan Tonkin then sort of leading into that question, where do you find bug reporting roles / opportunities? So I suppose that can include just, quality assurance, but again, is there a hub for that? Is there a good resource or a good place to learn about roles that could be for bug reporting, quality assurance, etc.?
It sounds like you're asking like where to find like sort of QA roles specifically. That's what I kind of gathered from it. Like, if you're looking for like say specific sort of like game QA roles, like I always like to use I think Games Jobs Direct and just search for like say QA gameindustry.biz. I've got a great like sort of job roles section. There's one called Grackle HQ, which I learned about like a year or so ago, which I think is like an AI. I don't think it's AI generated. Like, I can't remember if it is or not, but basically it's just basically like a hub page where it just lists like all the games industry jobs that are available. It's not perfect, but it's really good to kind of like have that nice little hub to find things. You can just search for like say for QA jobs there as well.
Yeah, and one more to the list. I think hitmarker.net I have found has been actually quite good, just at providing information and being quite good, quite easy to share it with other people as well. So, and in most of these sites, you will find that there is a filter, or you can use like Control F and then just type QA, and then it will just scrape the page for wherever the letters QA appear. So probably some good advice there. We've got quite a few questions. What I just want to make sure I do, Harun, is how are you for time, in the sense of if you were here at 5 minutes past 2 p.m., would that completely and utterly shatter your worldview, or is that something that we can
No, I'm happy to stay for an extra 5 minutes or so it's okay.
That's fine. I just want to make sure, because obviously if you need to go, you need to go, and I would hate to keep you here beyond your means. So you mentioned earlier about the ISTQB qualification, which you did a great job of saying what those letters mean, but I won't. But Tommy Ack just basically asks, do you know where one would get that qualification? Like, is there a particular school or a provider or website that happens to be good at this sort of thing and that you'd recommend?
The official ISTQB website does actually list like providers for the actual like courses and for the exams as well. They're not cheap. They're not cheap. I think from memory they might be like a couple of grand, so it can be a bit expensive. So I mean, if you're already working in the industry, maybe you can try to convince like your manager to actually to go onto those courses, because they're quite useful when it comes to if you want to get into like say automation or more into like the production and management stuff, because there's a lot of great sort of content from what I've seen anyway. It's been something that I've been interested in like going down at some point. But yeah, the website is quite a good place to start. I don't know if there's any sort of like HE or FE courses that technically do it, but I know that website is a good place to start.
Nice. Thank you for answering that. We'll move on to the next question. A couple of little chats and comments there. So next one. I'm going to struggle to read out the username because it's like non-standard. Scott Tycho maybe asks, what interview questions are generally asked during interviews on sort of for AAA companies? And I guess this is in the context of quality assurance.
Yeah, some of the questions off the top of my head I can think of, they usually want to ask like what you know about that studio, just kind of show like you're doing the research into like who they are and what they're kind of working on. Which sounds kind of obvious, but I remember someone telling me once that that a person went for an interview and they thought it was a different studio, which isn't great. So yeah, just showing knowledge of the place that you're working at. They might also ask you like where you see yourself in 5 years' time, which is like a standard question for most people. And again, like in the QA setting, it's absolutely fine if you say that you want to go into this role or that role, because it's kind of expected for you to kind of like wanting to kind of progress into those other roles. So you don't get a negative for just being kind of honest about where you want to see yourself in the game industry. Sometimes you might get asked like sort of hypothetical questions as well. So sometimes I've had questions where like someone might say to me like, oh, here's a pen. How would you QA this pen, or how would you test this metaphorical setting? So like they want to kind of see what your critical thinking or what your thought processes are if you were to do that. The pen one sounds silly, but like it's a good way of kind of like judging like how you would actually go about testing something.
You've unlocked a silly memory of mine, which is one of my managers having a team meeting and handing a pen to everyone and going, "Sell me this pen." At the end, the right answer is to say, "Why do you want this pen?" or something like that, Or yeah, it's such a silly little anecdote, but I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean by people kind of trying to find creative ways to like take a simple thing and show you're working out, or show like, how would you tackle a sort of an intangible problem. One of the questions is about providing a link that you mentioned earlier, Grackle HQ, which I've done, which I think means that actually we've got one more question left in the chat. So I'm going to take this last question and then we're going to wrap up there. So if you have more questions, I haven't even plugged it yet, but Intergames has an amazing Discord server. I am biased because I run that Discord server. It is sort of full of a community of UK games developers, lots of entry level sort of talent out there looking for their first opportunities, but also a huge number of industry professionals who spend time in that server to give back and help that entry level talent, help those people that are looking for a career in the games industry. So jump in there. If you've got questions that aren't answered today, you can ask them in that Discord server, and I assure you, you will get a brilliant answer from someone who absolutely knows what they're talking about rather than me. This last question comes from a Robin. Robin says, from a QA perspective, how can you or your team be best supported by production to do your job well?
Oh, that's a very good question. I feel like it could be a very good one. I would say giving them the sort of the tools that they need to be able to do their job effectively, providing them with the information on upcoming features, levels, whatever that might be, that is close to being tested, getting them involved in the planning stages as well. So, kind of trying to make estimates of like, okay, this is how long it's going to take to make this feature, like how long do you need to test it, making sure that they're involved in those sort of planning processes, and even in the retrospective as well. So like maybe you've done a great sprint from maybe from like a design side or something, but from a QA side, maybe it's not been so great. So having that QA perspective on how things have gone in that milestone, in that sprint, might help to kind of improve processes in the future. But also just kind of reiterating to the team about, making use of QA. Like if you need that QA support, if you need QA to come in and test something early on, just let production know, and then they can hand that information over. So it's all about that synergy.
Nice. Synergy. That's a key word that I haven't heard used in a while, other than when I'm playing RPGs. Anyways, that I think about does it for questions from the audience. Thank you everyone who asked a question. Tommy, Robin, Dan, and Scott Tycho. Thank you all kindly for joining us and chatting with us today. Thank you, Harun, for joining us on the Intergame platform, especially because I asked you very last minute. Very kind of you, and thank you for bringing those resources to us and delivering that talk here with us. Everyone listening, I hope that you found that useful. I hope that there's been some knowledge is gleaned there that you either didn't know at all, or you'd maybe heard it kind of mentioned, but today you kind of really got it spelled out nice and plain for you. And I hope it all gives you some sort of momentum and some inspiration as to what you want to kind of level up and work on next. Harun, you mentioned the book at the end of the blah blah blah, the presentation slides there. But is there anything else that you just want to mention, shout out, free platform? They can be words of wisdom. They can be a monetary shill. It's all yours.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, go check out the book, leave a nice Amazon review. But yeah, I would say, if you're interested in the book, have a look at it. If you go on my Twitter, I made a trailer for the book, which is very funny. So I put a lot of effort into that, so please watch that as well. I also have a game app called It's Grew Up North, which is a point-and-click adventure game set in a fictional Yorkshire village as well. So if you're a fan of old school, Lucas Artsy sort of point-and-click games, it's kind of like a homage to that. You play as an old man who fights aliens, which is That should be more than enough for you to buy it, I think.
Say the name of that game one more time for me.
It's Grim Up North.
It's Grim Up North. Nice. I'm just making sure that I've got it in front of me, and that way we can include it in the little email that we'll send to everyone after this event is done.
Last bit of advice I would give is like just make sure you stay hydrated as well. Just drink water.
Stay hydrated, everyone. All right, brilliant. I think that brings it to an end, everyone. Again, yeah, some really lovely chat there. Lots of people responding strongly to the pen question. Let that be something for everyone to chew on till sort of, I don't know, until someone actually asks you that question in real life, I suppose. Again, we've been into games. If you are joining us for the first time, check out, there'll be a little link somewhere in the YouTube video that takes you to our Discord server, or at least our link tree, which kind of links you to everything that we're doing. We do live streams like this every single week. Next week, I believe we're doing one specifically about animation, how to implement your work from animation into actual game engines. And we're doing actually a couple of events before then as well. We're doing an event this afternoon, which is an interview with Oliver William Walker, who's a level designer who's done all sorts. And then tomorrow we're doing a talk that's on narrative design from Lydia Cockerham. So we're really covering like every single discipline this week. Monday we did a sort of 2D character art as well. So the full spectrum of games is being represented on this channel in 1 week. Go check out those events if you're interested. I assure you they're going to be fantastic. But speaking of fantastic events, we're done here. Harun. Thank you, Harun, again for joining us. It's been really kind of you. Best of luck with everything coming up. And fingers crossed you get a sudden surge of game sales and 5-star reviews. I, for one, am excited to go check out your trailer. So there you go. Right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We're all done here. See you at the next one, maybe. Until then, bye-bye for now, everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.